Forgive the props, but it was Josiah's idea. Little effects. Friend or foe? Sunlight. Bad? Good? A little bit of both? Does the amount of bad outweigh the amount of good, or does the amount of good that it produces outweigh the amount of bad? This is an important subject because I think there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of skepticism about sunlight. From a world of dermatology, we're going to hear that it's evil, it's bad, and that the risks far outweigh the benefits. And then what I want to bring here today to you is a little more of a balanced approach, that sunlight is not evil, that sunlight can affect everything from low levels of depression known as dysthymia. Adequate sunlight and adequate daylight sunlight exposure can affect sleep rhythms, can help you with your insomnia. It can actually help Alzheimer's patients because of how daytime sunlight interacts not only with serotonin, but then with melatonin production. Ironically, I know that sounds odd because you've been told that you have to have a completely dark room, and you do. But there's about a rhythm, there's a biorhythm, there's a daily diurnal rhythm that sunlight and darkness, how melatonin, cortisol, and then serotonin are produced. It's complicated. I want to get into the details, but I want to set straight the messages, the mixed messages that are out there, that sunlight is all bad and all evil. I'm not canning the sun and selling it to you. So I'm not doing anything here other than I'm going to hopefully offload unto you what I believe is very, very important, that you understand the benefits and the health benefits of sun. So thanks for being with us. Thanks for tuning in here today. So sun, we good here, Josiah? Am I right to move this forward a little bit? Sunlight, friend or foe? So I would say to you in general terms, I need to find my marker. In general terms, what we've been told for eons, basically, is that it is without question your foe. That sunlight is bad, sunlight is evil, sunlight gives you skin cancer. So overwhelmingly, I would like to say from probably the give or take, 30s on, we have been told in the world of dermatology and in medicine that you must get out of the sun, that you must restrict the amount of sunlight that you receive because of the damaging and ravaging effects to your skin for burn and for skin cancers. So here's what we do know, that intense level of sunlight exposure, what we're just going to say UVR, ultraviolet radiation. I don't want to get into UVB, UVA. Let's just talk about ultraviolet radiation. So when I use that terminology, you know what we're talking about here. So here's the real key. The real key is that excessive sunlight exposure certainly can cause a burn. All right, you traumatize and damage the skin. But the reality of it is it just, does it cause melanoma? Reality here is that melanoma, actually, the incidence of melanoma occurs proportionately higher in areas that are not exposed to the sun. Necessarily, in other words, not just here, or maybe here, or your forehead, or your ear, but a lot of times it's areas that have typically not been exposed, where you have clothing on. Now, does excessive sunlight and burns damage the DNA structures? Yes, absolutely. Can it induce skin cancers? Yes, absolutely. We have basal cell, we have squamous cell cancers. Absolutely. So wait a minute, but I thought you said that you were going to bring balance to that. Yes, I'm telling you that the majority of the proponents in this area are going to take the side that sunlight is bad and evil. It is your foe because it induces these cancers. Now I'm going to give you some terminology. And not that I'm a fan or in agreement with what the WHO does and the World Health Organization by any means, but the WHO, in essence, the World Health Organization sets some basic standards, and they kind of qualify what certain areas of health, what they bring as far as benefits or detriments. And I don't want to, again, there's no need to get into it's called the dailies. And it has to do with how they quantify certain areas and how it affects human health and physiology. Here's what they believe and here's what they say. That really about 0.1% of the world's population is negatively affected by the sunlight. In other words, disease, skin cancers. 0.1. That's not really very much. Okay, 0.1%. Now, you say, wait, well, I can't believe it. Melanoma rates are rising and squamous cell cancers are rising. It's actually, melanoma is kind of quelled. So yes, bringing down the amount of sunlight, excessive sunlight exposure is damaging. Not only can it induce cancer, etc., and I'll get into this collagen and vitamin A and your structural components, but this is a very small percentage. On the other hand, it's believed to go, I'm not real sure what, but the 1-2 plus of the dailies or more, it's believed that over 3 billion people worldwide, so it goes, who knows where this percentage, it could go up to 15 to 20%, are actually benefited, now this is interesting, by sun. And later on, I mean, as I go through this, I'll show you what I mean by that. So here's in essence, the takeaway message is that those that are opponents of this say that it's damaging and that it's killing people. The reality of it is by the WHO, not the group the WHO, by the WHO, it's really, the reality of it is it's a very small percentage that are negatively affected. Yet we weight this completely on this side of this. It burns you, gives you skin cancers. Be cognizant of that. It can and it does. But the reality of it is qualified amounts of sunlight have amazing benefits health-wise. So that the general theme is there's a lot more people that are benefited. It's believed up to or in the neighborhood up to 3 billion are benefited by adequate sunlight, ranging everything from MS to autoimmune conditions to bone health. The list just goes on. Immune activity, cathelicidin production, vitamin D production. It goes on and on and on. Okay, so as we move through this, I don't want you to be confused. You're saying, I wanted you to really give me something that's nuts and bolts. Let's talk about inflammaging. Well, that's next. That's the next one. This is important because as you pass on information to your family, to your children, to your grandchildren, this could be very, very powerful and impact their health in a major way. Okay, how does the sun actually damage you? Well, first of all, it damages the DNA, too much of it. Let me qualify that. It can destroy the collagen structure. It ages your skin, like mine, too fast. It breaks down and destroys vitamin A production and certainly can induce skin cancer. So we know that excessive sunlight can do these things, which would be considered negative, horrific, not a good thing, and harmful to you. Let's talk about the amount of sun exposure when you're in the sun. Let's just say for 30 minutes. What are one of the components? What are some of the benefits? Some of the benefits, and what can happen? Number one, 30 minutes. I think the key here is for you to limit your exposures. See, I don't think you should be out there for 2, 3, and 4 hours in direct sunlight, summer sun, more direct sun, solstice sun, where it's directly above you or more directly above you. See, when sun is at a direct or at an indirect angle, it literally bounces off the earth. You don't have as much direct sunlight. When the sun's more summertime, more direct over you, more solstice sun, you have much higher radiation, ultraviolet radiation that you're going to receive. 30 minutes of exposure in a Caucasian individual can produce as much as, I have notes, as much as 50,000 units. Some might disagree with that, but the literature, a lot of the literature shows 50,000 units of vitamin D. Someone that is lightly tanned, it may go down to maybe 20 to 30,000 IUs a D. Dark-skinned, it could go down to 10,000 units. So you can see the pigmentation in your skin change. Now, why is this important? Because vitamin D production in the body via the sun modifies the immune system, modifies immune reactions, modifies autoimmune conditions, stimulates cathelicidin, which I'll talk about in a second. So you need sun exposure for a number of issues. The one in principle and first and foremost is vitamin D production. How is it produced? Well, it's produced in your skin when it interacts with cholesterol, cholesterol is the donating agent here, and in your skin, and the oils in your skin, literally encourages the conversion to 125-hydroxyvitamin D. So cholesterol plus sun and the oils in the skin, you convert to, let's just say, D, vitamin D. So what's the benefits of vitamin D? Well, if you've listened to the show for any period of time, I go back about 12, 13 years. And frankly, before, back in the early 2000s, 2003, 2004, and I began to talk about, I did an entire radio show at one point in time just on vitamin D, because I was stunned whenever I really started digging into D research, the amount of health benefits, and I didn't even know them, and I began to learn them, and we began to talk about them, and we kind of were met with some opposition at that point in time, because it was like, you're crazy. You're telling people to take vitamin D. You're telling people to raise their vitamin D levels. You're telling them to get the levels checked. Don't you know that vitamin D is toxic? Don't you know that sun burns people's skin and gives them skin cancers? There was a lot of negative conversation around my discussions of D and even sunlight at that point in time, but more so about vitamin D and taking D and raising your vitamin D levels. So what does vitamin D, this photosynthetic reaction, sunlight plus cholesterol, what does it actually then do? Well, it can boost your immune system. That's a real key player. It intensifies the immune system. It can raise your immune activity. It's actually been documented years ago. I made some notes. If you look up some research on sanatoriums with TB, tuberculosis, they literally would put folks in these sanatoriums. They would isolate them. They would try to improve their nutrition, and many people believe was all that they ate better, but they tried to get them to eat better. They separated them, but you know what else they did? They found that those that were in a lot of sunlight during the course of the day, they would survive. They had like a 32% increased survival rate, plus that those that were in more regular sunlight, because it's stimulatory. What's it stimulate? What's it do? Well, it increases what's called antimicrobial peptides. Okay. Number one, it has to do with something called cathelicidin. And this cathelicidin, as this is stimulated, cathelicidin actually then is activating your immune system against viruses, bacterias. So directly, in an indirect manner, sunlight mixing with cholesterol, with oils in the skin, a photosynthetic reaction, you convert and make D. It begins to modify your immune system, stimulates a specific compound in the body known as cathelicidin, upregulates your body's defense mechanisms against viruses, upregulates your mechanisms against bacteria. Do we think it's a coincidence that in the winter we have more flus and viruses, influenzas, more colds, rhinoviruses? It's not coincidental. In the middle of the winter, we see much, much more of this. How about areas from a latitude standpoint, near the equator? Here's what we find. If you look at the information, those that live closer to the equator versus those that live farther away from the equator, you have rising rates of MS, hypertension, rheumatoid arthritis, type 1 diabetes. See, most of these, not always, but a number of these conditions, that's just a smattering. Okay? The number of these conditions are autoimmune and immune conditions. So vitamin D is an immune modulator. It's a regulant. It can stimulate your immune system against virus and bacteria, but it can also balance your immune system so that it doesn't get out of kilter and start self-attacking. So it's an immune modulator. So this being the equator, when you move in latitude farther and farther degrees away from the equator, you see rising rates of autoimmune conditions, more degenerative types of disorders, and autoimmune triggers. Now, we haven't even talked about the role of bone health and how bone health is benefited by vitamin D and sun exposure, but that's another one of the components. Do you know that even acne, if you get young people that have acne and significant skin issues, psoriasis, you know that even treatments for years with a drug known as Sorolin, methoxysorolin, I believe I'm spelling this right, Sorolin. Sorolin, they would actually give you this, it's a skin sensitizer. It actually hypersensitizes your skin to ultraviolet rays. They would give you this Sorolin. This is for psoriasis. That's where the name of the drug came from. For the treatment of psoriasis, and then put you under ultraviolet lamps to intensify the exposure to help cure skin conditions, psoriasis, because they didn't really know some of the underlying mechanisms years ago. But so you can see, now we've, quote, moved away from a lot of, so we think this is insane now. The reality is, I don't know that it's insane. I just think where we make the mistake, we just get too much sunlight in intense periods of times. We're out there for 3 and 4 hours. We burn, we damage the DNA. We then can trigger damage to the skin, and we can induce skin cancer. But remember my little synopsis, that less than, I have 0.1%, I'm sure there's some conflicting numbers to that, but we'll say less than 1% are negatively affected by the sun in the terms of cancers to the skin. So I'm saying modify your exposures. And much, much greater than 1% are benefited. Harm versus benefit. It's flipped. So is it friend or foe? I will tell you that I'm going to make a statement right now that it is much more your friend than it is your foe. You need to learn how to use it. You need to learn how to be benefited by the sun and have small amounts, minimal amounts of exposures. That's where your benefits come from. Friend or foe. A lot of confusion. Many, many folks, I think, still on the bandwagon telling you that you need to have tons of sunscreens on. You need to have no exposed parts or minimally exposed body parts. And once again, I somewhat disagree. I think what you're seeing now is that even with these intense sunscreens, you still have penetration to deeper layers of the skin and not necessarily as much up to the surface. And you see more damage taking place at a basement membrane area. So even using sunscreens, it's not all as effective as people think it is. I still think you use them, and I'd rather you use a more natural version, a more zinc oxide based, as opposed to a lot of the oxybenzenones and chemicals that are out there, especially even on youngsters. Zinc oxide is going to turn white, and it'll kind of occludes the skin and maybe looks a little funny on you, but it's not that big of a deal. Protect your skin. Just minimize your exposures. I think you need to be, if you can, in 20, 30-minute increments, you're in, you're out. Get out if you can. If you go to the beach, get under something. Put a shirt on. Get the umbrellas. Don't stay out there for 3 hours. Get under the sun for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Get out of the sun. Let your body cool down. Let your body kind of rejuvenate. Let it not be so exposed, especially if you're at shores and so on. Number 2, you need to be loaded with antioxidants. And what are antioxidants? Well, they're going to be things such as C. I'm going to talk about buffered C. You need to have vitamin A in the foods that you consume, and in something like the daily essentials, you need to have plenty of that. You need to have antioxidants in general, things like resveratrol, polyresveratrols. You need to have protective mechanisms and nutrients that come from colors in the foods, carotenoids and so on, that you consume. Why? Because these will protect your skin from the harmful, quote, intense rays, right? Now remember, the rays from sunlight can be harmful. Too much, extended periods of time, damages collagen, destroys vitamin A, damages the DNA structure, induces cancer. Small increments, short period of time, and you need to have plenty of antioxidants. You need to be taking an antioxidant blend. You need to be on the daily essentials. You need to be on buffered C ascorbates. You need to be on nutrients that help protect you and reduce the amount of harmful damage that's coming from the skin. Do I have to be out of the sun completely? No. Should I be in it for extended periods of time? No. Should I minimize my exposures in essence? Yes. Should I use wisdom? Absolutely. Are there more benefits than negatives? I think unquestionably there are more benefits than there are negatives. So we've talked about latitudes, moving away from the sun, and areas of the sun that increase away from the equator, increase the number of and the amount of disease. We also see that there's greater rates of septicemias, which is in essence blood infections. So individuals have a greater potential to become septic, have blood infections, systemic blood infections. The less sunlight, the farther they are away from the equator, the less direct sunlight they're getting. They have, believe it or not, higher rates of gastroenteritis, which is inflammation of the lining of the stomach. And I don't know that anyone really understands or knows what the issues are here, but I believe it has everything to do with bad bacteria and good. Remember, I said that a lot of direct sunlight, balanced amounts, produces something called cathelicidin, which then raises these antimicrobial peptides against viruses and against bacteria. So we have an immune regulant, we have an immune stimulant. So is it possible that people are garnering more gastroenteritis and gastrointestinal infections, more blood infection? Obviously you had to be exposed to something, but how does my body defend me? Indirectly, lack of sunlight downregulates the immune system. I'm not making cathelicidin. I'm not upregulating these antimicrobial peptides. I'm not dealing with viruses and bacteria well. Why? Because of inadequate sunlight, I'm not converting my vitamin D. Plus, we are on a penchant in the last 30 to 40 years to reduce cholesterol to astronomically low, not high, low levels. Lower, lower, lower. The lower it is, the better it is. And that's just not what we're after here. So we see that certain diseases and disorders increase. Now, what about your sleep? What about some real basic things? Now, I'm just going to cover these last couple areas very, very quickly. Friend or foe? Can it damage you? No question. Can it benefit you? No question. Your immune system. Can sunlight downregulate the rates of autoimmune diseases? Absolutely. Can it help to clear up my skin with acne? Absolutely. Can it lower the rates of systemic infections? Yes. Does it have the ability to reduce autoimmune triggers in my body when I'm in the sun? Yes. But can it give me skin cancer? Yes. Does it mean I should never be in the sun? No. Does it mean I should be balanced? Yes. Does it mean I should cover everything? No, because then you can't convert, right? Oils, cholesterol in the skin go through the conversion, a photosensitive reaction dependent upon light, sunlight, UV radiation to in essence help you. There's a lot more to this, but I'm going to pretty much close on these couple areas. Here's what we also see. Folks that have more sunlight and more sun exposure, you have to listen carefully, generically have lower incidences of cancer. Not skin cancers. Someone that has way too much sun exposure is going to get skin cancers. I'm talking about the body of evidence looking at cancer. The overall incidence of cancer goes down. So I increase my D production via the sun, and there's a corresponding decrease in the rates of cancer. It's in the literature. It's black and white. Number two, can it help Alzheimer's patients? Oh, can it? Now you're saying this cures Alzheimer's. No. What we know is many of these patients have something termed like a sundown problem. In essence, they get their nights and days mixed. They have a very, very, very imbalanced sleep-wake cycle. Many patients with Alzheimer's do not sleep at night. Part of the issue is they're not making melatonin. We'll just give them melatonin. Well, the reality of it is some research has shown that you get Alzheimer's patients, neurodegenerative diseases, you get them in the sunlight, they sleep better at night. It helps to manage some of their sundowning issues. I'll explain why in a minute. It has to do with melatonin, but I'll explain that. So we know that there's benefits to, number one, to cancers, the body of evidence, cancers in general. Alzheimer's disease can be managed much more cohesively without more meds. You can get these patients sleeping better, regulate their rhythms. They do a lot better. MS, we see that folks that many times move more to a latitude near equatorial areas have a decrease in their MS symptoms. Is it always 100%? No. I know an individual specifically that I work with that made this move, had an option to, husband in the military, did this specifically, didn't really see a major response. I think it may have had a lot to do, although she's been managed for years and there's been no progression. I believe it may have had a lot to do with the degree of her progression already. But in general terms, you see that MS symptoms are not as severe. Rheumatoid arthritis symptoms, many times autoimmune conditions, not are necessarily cured, but the symptoms and the severity improve with better sunlight exposure, friend or foe. It can certainly be your friend. It most certainly can be your foe. How do we find the balance? The other area, dysthymia, low grades of depression. So this area today is becoming a lot of Americans with dysthymia, which is just considered a low-grade depression. I've really got the blues. I'm kind of just blah. I'm always down. I see things more cloudy than I see them sunshiny, if you will. Here's what the literature shows. That low grades of depression, mild to even moderate depression, dysthymia, patients without question do better when they're exposed to sunlight. Hence, you see a lot of times folks that move to Arizona or they move to more southern climates, sunny climates, as opposed to what we're exposed to in the Pittsburgh area and in latitudes farther to the north, that in many cases, the literature is absolutely support the fact that they generically do better. They're not as low. They're not as down. They're not as depressed. And here's why. Because we have I'll get back now to why I believe it helps Alzheimer's patients. What we see is with this sun exposure during the day, you see this is necessary for melatonin production. I know that sounds like a contradiction in terms, because what we have been taught, what you have probably been taught, and what you've probably read is when you go to sleep, in order to make melatonin from the pineal gland, you've got to have everything dark, close everything off, and that is true. I tell people don't leave lights on in your room. Those are bad habits. It reduces melatonin production at night. But here's the key. The key is during the day, if you get more sun, you actually improve or you prepare the body for melatonin production at night. So you literally regulate the rhythm. So sunlight during the day is preparing the pineal gland and stimulating the pineal gland to make melatonin later in the day as the sun goes down. Now, I know that sounds like a contradiction in terms, because you would say, wait, if that would be the case, then why wouldn't we have light on at night? I would sleep. But no, once you do go to sleep, or you're attempting, once the body starts making it, it's almost as though it's almost like if you think of plants and a crop, it can't have sun 24 hours a day. But look at tomatoes. If tomatoes do not have adequate warmth and heat and sunlight and nights that have a tendency to cool, the tomatoes don't grow. You need the sunlight. Do you need it 24 hours a day? No, it'll burn them up. Do you need rain 24 hours a day? Absolutely not. It'll rot the plants. Body's kind of the same way. So sunlight during the day induces or helps to produce melatonin production at night. Hence, you can help Alzheimer's patients, number one. Number two, you can help depression or dysthymia, because what I'm doing is I am actually making melatonin. There's a direct interaction between serotonin and melatonin. See, I will make more serotonin when I'm exposed to the sunlight during the course of the day. And then my body, through what's called a methylation process, I will convert serotonin to melatonin. Now I can sleep at night. So in part, you see that people generically have better moods, feel better during the day, are more up if they have more sun exposure. So if you work indoors, like my office here has no windows, none. And when I have some time, sometimes I just open the back door and just get outside for a couple of minutes. I need to do that more because there's something just about getting even 5 minutes of sunlight. So if you have a chance at work and you work indoors all day long, if you can just get out for 10 minutes and just get into the sun, huge benefits. Why? It helps the body's natural production of serotonin. Indirectly, it prepares you for nighttime melatonin production. It's stimulating the pineal gland to do what it's supposed to do 12, 14, 15 hours later. You can improve mood. You can improve depression. You can improve insomnia conditions with more sunlight exposure and physical activity and direct sun exposure during the course of the day. We also see that the quality of sleep improves the more sun an individual gets to during the day. So even something as simple as not just getting to sleep, but even the quality of your sleep. Summary: can sun damage you? Yes. Do I qualify it? Yes, too much. I can't be out there for 3 and 4 hours, 5 hours. I need to go in 20, 30-minute increments. And I'm not talking about getting out of the sun for 5 minutes and then going right back for 30 minutes. I'm talking that you should have breaks. Get under umbrellas if at all possible. If you work outside, have a hat on. Make sure you have a shirt on. There should be certain things that you do to reduce the amount of exposure that's continuous. Does the color of your skin, light versus tan versus African American, does that alter the rate of vitamin D production in your body with the same amount of light exposure? Absolutely. So we need to see that individuals with darker skin are going to actually need more sunlight. Okay? Can it modify the immune system? Yes. It can balance the immune system. It's a modifier. It can downregulate autoimmune conditions, but it can stimulate a weakened immune system. Cathelicidin. So as we cover all of this, does it improve the quality of your sleep? Yes. Can it improve mood disorders? Yes. Can it improve bone health? Yes. Can it reduce the quantity or the potential for systemic infections? Yes. Can it reduce the incidence of gastroenteritis? Yes. I mean, the list goes on. So when I opened and said at the beginning that the complications, and I think the field of medicine, and in particular dermatology, has done us a huge disservice by saying, get out of the sun, get out of the sun, it's evil, it's bad. Started in the 30s, really took off in the 70s and said, sun is so bad for you, you need to get out of the sun because it'll give you cancer, you're going to die from it. We became very paranoid. We covered our bodies, lathered it in sunscreens, dark clothes on, get out of the sun, get out of the sun. And I think you've seen a lot of corresponding negatives. Less than 1% of the world's population is affected negatively by a tremendous amount of sun. Is that important? Yes, because yes, people do die of skin cancers. But we know that much, much more than 1%, possibly 10 to maybe 20%, and I can't tell you 100% on this, but because no one knows for sure, but if you just look at osteoporosis, mood disorders, dysthymia, this could go up to 40 or 50%. Legitimately, that are benefited by the sun. Sunlight, friend or foe? I say it's your friend. So now, I cut down the middle, friend or foe, find a balance. Now I say to you, it's your friend. You just have to know how to use what God's giving you. It is your friend. Don't be afraid of the sun. Sun is beneficial. Sun has health benefits. Can it be detrimental? Yes. Can water be detrimental? Yes. Do you need it? Without question. I think the same balance has to be found here. Let me read to you real quick. Let me just encourage you out of the scripture. I want to talk to you for a moment, just a quick word to give you a little bit of an understanding, I believe, of many times I like to say is God's desire to make himself known to us. God has, throughout the scripture, the word of God is to reveal his son. This word is here for us God to communicate with us. And I want to read to you what I believe is very important in chapter 9, verses starting in about 13 of Exodus. It says, "This is what the Lord said to Moses. Get up early in the morning, confront Pharaoh, say to him, this is what the Lord God of the Hebrews says. Let my people go." If you're of Jewish descent, you know this story. You know what I'm talking about. Let my people go. So that they may do what? Worship me. I often say God created us for fellowship, to worship him, then to serve him. I think many of us have that all backwards. We're too busy serving. We don't worship and we don't fellowship. We got that backwards. "Or this time I will send the full force of my plagues against you." So often you hear folks saying, what kind of a God would I want to serve that would just destroy people? You have to understand what's happening. God is always about, he works and functions according to his character. That's why he's revealed himself in his word. He functions according to his nature and his purposes. He says, "So that they may worship me, or this time I will send the full force of my plagues against you and your officials and your people, so you may know that there is no one like me in all of the earth. For by now I could have stretched out my hand, struck you and your people with a plague, and have wiped them off the face of the earth. But I have raised you up." Who's he talking to? Pharaoh, talking to the nation of Egypt. They were a pagan nation. This was a pagan man that despised God, didn't have a belief in God, had no desire to, was obstinate, hard-hearted, stiff-necked against God. God says, I could just wipe you out, but I've raised you up. I've allowed you to survive this. You'll find out here why. This is interesting. "For this very purpose, I have raised you up for this very purpose, that I might show you my power, and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. You still set yourself against my people, and will not let them go. I have raised you up for this very purpose, that I might show you my power, and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth." God wants to show himself to his people that believe and trust in him, to reveal more of himself to us. Number two, God is attempting and desires to make himself known to those that have no belief. We see it here with the plagues. We see it here with the use of Moses. We see it with Pharaoh. God continued to relent from destruction by attempting to give them a chance to relent and repent and say, I believe in you, I trust in you. God is after your heart, he's after my heart. He's after the unbeliever's heart, he's after the believer's heart. The believer, he wants to continue to develop a relationship with us and to continue that fellowship and reveal more of himself and his character and his purposes and his desires. To those that don't believe, God is attempting to show himself. He said to Pharaoh, for this very purpose, I raised you up. I am allowing you to survive, in essence, so that I can show you my power, that all the earth will know my power. And at the same time, what was he doing? He was teaching the children of Israel that I am going to show you beyond a shadow of a doubt, if you have any unbelief in your heart, that I am not the God that I say I am. I'm going to prove to you that I am. God bless you. Thanks for being with us. I hope you enjoy this. Son, friend or foe, enjoy some sunlight. It's good for you. It is not your foe. Know how to use it. God bless. Thanks for being with us. I'll see you next time.